Good morning and welcome to our adult story time this morning. If you recall, we started last week taking our stories from Do Elephants Jump, written by David Feldman, published by Collins, which is an imprint of HarperCollins Publishers. Today's story has to do with the fire department and who doesn't love a fireman. And the title or the question for today is, how did fire helmets get their distinctive shape? Compared to the stories about the origins of most clothing and uniforms, the history of the fire helmet in the United States is surprisingly well documented. And even more unusual, the design of the first mass-produced fire helmet has changed remarkably little since H.T. Gratacap, a maker of fine leather luggage, invented the headgear in 1836. Gratacap, a volunteer firefighter, realized the need for more protective equipment. He named his helmet the New Yorker, and with some modifications, it is still produced today by Cairns Helmets. Three of the features that distinguish and define a fire helmet from other protective headgear were featured almost from the start. The badge, mounted in the front of the helmet, the wide ribs that run from the top of the helmet to the brim, and wide brims, particularly the unusually long brim in the back. The Cairns brothers owned a business that manufactured badges, buttons, and insignias. They suggested mounting an identification badge to the front of the Gratacap helmet. When Gratacap retired, the Cairnses took over the helmet business, and the company, now owned by Mine Safety Appliances, is still a leading manufacturer of fire helmets. Let's take a look at the reasons for these three design elements and how they function today. 1. The front. The front refers not only to the obverse of a fire helmet, but also to the badges affixed thereon. As paramilitary organizations that often worked in sites with little visibility, fire departments needed a way to identify both a firefighter's unit and his rank during emergencies. The front became the means to achieve these goals. According to Dennis Stout, product manager for firehead protection and safety at E.D. Ballard Company, a firehouse's hierarchy was expressed through the front of the helmet. Chief's hats would have been more of a stove-type design with much more ornamentation than the rank and file. The front badges also had to do with competition between different firehouses, which was not unlike the rivalry between crosstown sports enemies, as Stout explains. In the big urban areas, they would fight to beat each other to a fire. In the New England area, for example, there was a very heavy concentration of Scottish and Irish people in the fire service. They were barroom brawlers and very prideful in their work. They literally would race to a fire scene. Often, fights would break out over territory at the actual fires. They would fight over whose company was in control of that fire. The fronts called out the company name and station numbers. Although competition among firefighters may not be very extinct, the front are of use for more prosaic reasons today. Dennis Ryan, product line manager for fire helmets at Mine Safety Appliances, the company that bought out Cairns in 2000, told Imponderables that fronts are still used to identify personnel, especially at big fires where many different units are participating. Ryan notes that by wearing easily identifiable fronts, personnel can be held accountable for problems. Some fronts have Velcro pieces that can be removed and placed on a board so that officers can keep track of exactly who is inside a building at any given time. And fronts can still let everyone know who is in charge. You can customize the front in a million ways. A regular firefighter will have a smaller front, usually 6 inches tall. If you're the fire chief, you'll have one that's a little bigger, maybe 8 inches, and a little more elaborate. Some fire departments use different colored hats to indicate rank, so that a commander can better keep track of personnel. The most common scheme, firefighters and engineers wear yellow helmets. Officers, like captains and lieutenants, don red helmets, and chief officers sport white helmets. 2. The ribs. As Stout so elegantly put it, it's hard to take a single piece of dead cow and shape it. Since all of the early fire helmets were fashioned from leather, Gratacap added resin to strengthen the material and then segmented the helmets by sewing in ribs to stiffen the relatively pliant leather. In the 19th century, communities often relied on the expertise of local cobblers to fashion their helmets, but almost all were constructed in quarters with seams to create the dome-like effect on the top. Although the ribs are no longer necessary to support modern fire helmets, most still feature them. Number 3, longer brims in the back. Before Cairns Brothers mass-produced fire helmets, most of the protective headgear for firefighters featured flat brims, according to Karen Del Principe, museum manager for the Museum of Firefighters in Hudson, New York. When they would get wet, the brims would go limp. Cairns developed the curved brim, which offered a huge advantage. When water hit the curved brim, the moisture would slide right off. The New Yorker-style helmet with a shorter front brim was probably modeled after the helmets worn by steam engine engineers. Del Principe suggests because it was dangerous for the engineers to hit their helmets every time they leaned forward to work on an engine. The main purpose of the big rear brim was to keep water from running down the collar of a firefighter, according to Arnold Merkich, retired New York firefighter and author of Early Fire Helmets. Merkich notes that hot water from fires is particularly dangerous, so the back brim, which is typically 3 inches in length, helps protect the neck and the back of the firefighter. The front brim, about half as big, assists in keeping debris off the firefighter's face, diverting most water away, and serving as a convenient place to attach protective goggles and other equipment. Dennis Ryan observes that the functional utility of the big back brim has been greatly reduced because of the increase in protective clothing. Firefighters' jackets now ride up higher on their necks, but the back brim still offers an extra measure of safety against water, debris, and even flames, especially when the firefighter is in a crouching position. Over the past century and a half, lighter and more inexpensive materials have been introduced for fire helmets. In the 1920s, Cairns introduced aluminum helmets. In 1981, fiberglass. In 1992, Kevlar composite. What have changed surprisingly little are the styles themselves. There is such a thing as a modern fire helmet, which looks not unlike a construction helmet and features a still visible but much diminished brim. The modern style enables firefighters to slip in and out of tight spaces, such as daring auto rescue work, without the helmet getting in the way, yet still offering excellent protection against high heat and flames. But Dennis Ryan reports that the traditional shape is still popular, so helmet manufacturers offer an alternative. Fire departments can buy helmets with the old school look but fashioned from modern materials. The attraction is clear. Plastic helmets cost about half the price of the leather equivalents. What is more surprising, perhaps, is that the leather helmets are making a comeback. There is no doubt that the proponents of leather headgear are much more passionate about their choice. It's hard to get sentimental about wearing Kevlar atop your head. We heard from James L. Lester. What is more surprising, perhaps, is that leather helmets are making a comeback. There is no doubt that the proponents of leather headgear are much more passionate about their choice. It's hard to get sentimental about wearing Kevlar atop your head. We heard from James L. Jester, a firefighter for the Salisbury, Maryland Fire Department and member of the Salisbury Fools, Fraternal Order of Leatherhead Society. His society's website speaks of the devotion to the leather helmet as an icon. The leatherhead is a term used for a firefighter who uses the leather helmet for protection from the hazards we face every day on the streets. The leather helmet is an international sign of a firefighter, a symbol that is not only significant in tradition from the early years of firefighting, but one of bravery, integrity, honor, and pride. This helmet is a sign of who we are, not what we are. The leather helmet of choice for Salisbury Fools is the Cairns Brothers New Yorker N5A Introduced in 1836, the New Yorker helmet has remained virtually unchanged through 166 years of faithful and steadfast service. The New Yorker helmet retains the same look and quality that generation after generation of firefighters has relied on. Dennis Ryan reports that after 9/11, firefighters from all over the country saw the New York firefighters, and there was a surge of popularity for the traditional leather helmets. Even if many of the traditional leather helmets' salient design features are no longer crucial to their protection, firefighters are slow to change equipment that has served them well for almost 2 centuries. And this story was submitted by Shroy Friedman of Lakewood, New Jersey. So thank you for joining us today for our story on the fire helmets. And as a special, I've found a video that we'll be sharing tomorrow, and it has to do with why the fire engines are red. So thank you for joining us today. We hope you join us tomorrow when we talk about fire engines. And then we look forward to seeing you next week for another round of programs that we'll be bringing to you virtually. If you're out and about, stop in at the library and visit us. If you're at home and want to get out and about, stop in at the library and visit us. We would love to see you. Until we see you next time, stay safe, be healthy, and have a good week.